in here as we can so we can get this great candidate some exposure. Yes, I see you now. Fabulous.
Perfect.
All right. Well, on that note, I'm going to turn Woody Guthrie off and we can get started. You feeling okay?
Yeah.
You ready for this?
I'm
Dun
so
dun dun
excited.
dun 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 dun. Okay. Me. Ladies and gents and everyone in between, welcome to It Takes a Village, where we sit down with candidates from all over the country to discuss a wide range of issues brought by you, the viewer. I am your charming and furious host, Political Jess, and I'm not going anywhere. Before we get started, let's go over the guidelines. First, we're gonna be chatting from folks from all over the country. If you have a question for our grassroots candidate, please request up. You'll be allowed one question and one follow-up, and our guests will have 2 minutes per question. 18 plus only, minor safety, please. Stick to current events, and remember, we are not a debate stage. There is no shortage of amazing content creators dripping on this app that can provide that for you, and this ain't it, fam. Please be respectful of these amazing people who are working to make our country work for all of us. Failure to do so will result in your immediate rejection. Also, while we're yapping, please be tapping. It gets our information out to the FYP and gets more eyes onto these candidates who desperately need it. Also, please share the live. It does exactly the same thing. Let's show TikTok that we are engaged. Also, there may be some new little trinkets, some little stickers, some little thingies in our subsection for you to enjoy. So there may even be one for our guest. So please show some love. Speaking of our guest, our wonderful guest tonight comes to us from the great state of New Hampshire, running for U.S. Senate. Please give a warm and amazing welcome to the incomparable Jared Sullivan. Yay! If you have questions for him, please request up. But before we take on questions from the village people, that's a working title only, let's start things off with a little icebreaker. And I hate these things, Jared. I really do. But here we are. What I want to know is there are a plethora of things that inspire people to run for office. And I know that you have state house experience, but I want to know what inspired you to run for Senate. What was the camel that broke your back?
Yeah. Sort of the same thing, an expansion on what made me run for state rep. Back in January, when January 6th happened, I was like, holy God, we've lost faith in our system, and people willing to tear down our entire democracy and overturn elections because they think the system doesn't work. And I thought the best way to solve that is to get better people into politics who are honest and trustworthy. And so that's what made me run for state rep. And then fast forward to this year when Donald Trump won again. Obviously, we all know where we are. And suddenly in April, Donald Trump is ignoring court orders and ignoring the constitutionally defined rights that all of us have with respect to due process. And he's deporting people to El Salvador. We have, Garcia was all over the news at that time. And I was just horrified that the federal delegation for New Hampshire was saying nothing. And that's not entirely true. Jean Shaheen, the woman who is our current senator, who's going to be retiring, and that's why there's this race, she did say a little bit of stuff in the very beginning, but by and large, everybody else was quiet. And I just felt in this moment, I need people representing me who are going to rise to the moment, who are going to speak up to the injustice of the moment. And when you deport people without due process, even if they're here in this country illegally, even if they have definitely committed a crime, we don't know that unless they get their day in court. They get to prove their innocence, or the state gets to prove their guilt. And I was horrified that at that time, the people in power were saying things like Happy Passover on their social media and I'm going to fight for Social Security and education funding. Meanwhile, we're like just shredding the Constitution in front of our eyes, and they can't use their much larger platforms than I have to help educate people about how this will impact all of us. Because what stops Donald Trump from deciding that you are on some ICE list and off to El Salvador or wherever you go, and you don't get your chance in court to prove that they got the wrong person? So that to me was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back and said, you know what, I'm going to take this seriously. It's if you can't stand and rally around the Constitution, what are you doing?
Right. I 1,000%. Like, that's what we elected. That's what we elect people to do, right? And I tell
Yeah, we
people
swear an
this all
oath.
the time. We need people in office who care about people to govern the people. Like, if we don't have people in office that care about people, what are we doing here? So, awesome. Thank you for that. Can
Yeah.
you give us like just a little bit of background about like who you are, just like a sort of a little peek into the Jaredness of your campaign? Can you give us the Jaredness?
Yeah. So, I mean, I I have a lot of interests. They are largely center around the outdoors, which is why I live in northern New Hampshire. I live in what I would argue is one of the most beautiful places on the East Coast. I live among the tallest mountains. I am about 10 minutes from a ski mountain, so I celebrate when we get large snowstorms because I just drive up to the ski mountain and I'll ski for an hour or two before I have to go to work.
Jealous.
During the summer I go hiking. Right now the leaves are just starting to change color. People come from all over the world to vacation where I live just to
Hmm.
see the colors here. It's the White Mountains of New Hampshire are consistently ranked as the best place to go to check out the leaves changing. And so, I just really take full advantage of that. I love the fact I live in a small town, about 2,500 people. It's called Bethlehem, New Hampshire. We have one of the best ice cream shops in the country. It's been ranked 2 years in a row from James Beard as top five, and people come from all over for that. And I also work there, so if you're ever in the area, come say hi.
Nice.
Um, my interests are, yeah, skiing, whitewater rafting are my two favorite sports. Fortunately, they don't compete for time. One's a winter sport, one's a summer sport. But I really love playing ultimate frisbee. Back when I lived in cities, I used to be on ultimate frisbee teams. Grew up playing football and lacrosse, and love dogs. Sadly, I just lost my dog a few months ago, but I'm sure there's another one in my future at some point. And I would say, yeah, well, the other thing I like to do too is improv. So I did a live improv show when I lived in Chicago, and I recently got back into a little bit of improv, not a ton in New Hampshire because I have to drive like an hour and a half to get to the improv group, but I try to participate at least once or twice a month. So that's a really fun activity as well.
Amazing. Yeah, I love improv. Improv is so great. It's so good
Yeah,
for you too.
it's good for your
So,
brain. It's also hilarious.
absolutely. Absolutely. If you guys do not enjoy improv, anybody in the chat, please go and experience what the whole improv scene is. It is so wonderful. It's delightful. So, all right. Well, there are just a million issues that are hitting us all in the face like a fire hose. And it's hard for everybody to focus on everything all at once, all the time. What is one issue that you are absolutely passionate about that you feel like should be front and center in this election cycle?
Well, I already talked about the number one, which is we have to defend our Constitution. I am so frustrated by the lack of fight by Democrats in the face of a president who seems to be willing to in attempting to become a dictator. And
Mm-hmm.
so, that's definitely the number one thing. What I always tell people is we need to triage this moment. And if we can get through this moment and save our democracy, and I hate to say it, but that is an if. That is not a guaranteed thing. That's going to take work. That's going to take protests. That's going to take letter writing and pressure on all of your representatives all around the country. But let's assume we get through this moment. What do I want to focus on? I think the most important thing is to change the system that got us here. So our country right now is more divided than certainly it's ever been in my lifetime, but probably maybe since I don't know, maybe the Civil War was the last time we were this divided, right? And I don't want to end up in a second Civil War, right? That would be horrible. The amount of suffering that we feel now with all the problems that we're facing with respect to unaffordable housing, unaffordable health care, unaffordable, underfunded schools, all these sort of things that sort of get people really riled up, stagnant wages for most people in this country, if you're not a billionaire or worth hundreds of millions, all of those things are going to be meaningless if we lose our democracy, right? And so we need to figure out how do we get out of this spot. And so I really believe that we can reform our democracy. We can get money out of politics is one thing. And the other thing is we need to get rid of gerrymandering. So I've been focused like laser focused on gerrymandering since long before it became front page news with what's going on in Texas and California and the rest of it. Now it's Missouri. And, so I'm putting in a bill in New Hampshire to outlaw it. New Hampshire's likely going to be one of those states that will hit the news soon because they're going to try to redistrict to ensure at least one Republican congressional seat. But the reality of it is it doesn't matter which party is in charge. Both parties have been guilty of it throughout history. Republicans have been worse. This last cycle, Democrats were actually worse. They did a pretty nasty job of it in Illinois and in New York. But now I think the Republicans are going to take back the mantle of being the ones most abusive of the idea of gerrymandering. But at the end of the day, there's still only been one party that I'm aware of that's ever made any effort to reform this. And that's been the Democratic Party in certain places like California, Colorado, Michigan. Those are sort of the three gold standards of anti-gerrymandering states. And so I've actually I'm putting in a bill this week because this is our bill filing period in New Hampshire to put in an independent commission bill in New Hampshire to try to make sure that this sort of gerrymandered situation. I mean, the reason why Republicans are in control of the House, at least maybe not this term, they probably won it fairly this last time, but prior to that was because they gerrymandered our state level offices. And it's such an atrocious thing. Politicians should not be picking their voters. It should be the voters picking their politicians, right? And that sounds like a catchy little saying that a politician would say, but that's actually what's happening when they gerrymander. So if you're watching this, you don't know what gerrymandering is, research what it means. It's actually an absurd practice that really dilutes your power as a voter, and it's a shameful practice. So yeah, those are two things that you can get done from the Senate. One, get the money out of politics. Well, we need to overturn Citizens United. We need a long-term vision in the way that the people who were anti-abortion back when Roe v. Wade was decided, before I was born, before you were born, before many of us were born, they had a long-term vision to overturn Roe v. Wade. We need that same vision for Citizens United. And this is something that the Democrats need to learn from the Republicans. They have long-term visions. That's what Project 2025 was about. That's what overturning Roe v. Wade was about. And we need a long-term vision to get these big corrosive parts of our democracy, which take away power from the voters and marginalize and divide us. We need to overturn those. And so that's what I'd be laser focused on. If we got through all that, I would say the number one thing I would like to do is make it so that people can find affordable housing. I don't think it's as complicated as people like to make it out to be. I'm a real estate economist. I could talk about this all day, actually. I don't want to bore everybody, but I actually do know quite a bit about real estate markets, how to make things better. And, one thing I would say is if we can develop a vaccine for COVID in under a year, we can figure out how to build housing a hell of a lot cheaper than we do and then build it faster. And what we need is a big investment into new technologies. One thing, I'm working on a project where I live of 3D printing a home. And they claim, and we'll see if this actually lines up in practice, but they claim they can build a house for about $190 a square foot. To give you context, it costs about $400 a square foot to build a house in New Hampshire. So we can literally cut that price in half. Suddenly, a 3-bedroom, 1-bath house is actually a starter home for $200,000 instead of $400,000 where we are today. So the government can make big impacts on this if they just focused on it, and they literally don't focus on it. So if we can't get housing for anybody who needs it, then we're failing as a society.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I feel like it goes back to what I was saying before, is having people in office that actually care about other people. You know what I mean? Like if we had people that cared about people governing the people, then these things that are plaguing us, housing, food, healthcare, they would be solved at this point, I feel like.
Well, they don't care about us because we're not the ones who pay for them to run their campaigns. And we need to acknowledge the corrosive impact of the amount of money flowing into politics. I'll share a story on that front. And a lot of my messaging comes back to money in politics because it makes politicians unresponsive. I sit on the Commerce Committee in the New Hampshire State House. We regulate insurance. I got a check from an insurance company for $250 during my last election. I didn't cash it, so let me just be very clear. But nearly everybody on my committee got that $250 check. Now, we're talking about a committee that in a state that's relatively small, not a super valuable insurance market, and we're still getting that sort of unsolicited money. all that does is inflate the cost of running an election. And so imagine what's happening for federal senators, federal congresspeople, governors, or state reps in states that are much larger than mine, like Texas, where you are, or California, or New York. Like, I'm sure they're getting much bigger checks than $250.
Yeah.
And so, that you wonder why people don't listen to you. That's why, because they need to listen to the people who can write them checks and continuously fund their campaign machine. And that's why I'm trying to do this grassroots. I'm just trying to get people to donate what they can afford so that people can go into Congress and not be beholden to whoever writes those checks to them, solicited or unsolicited.
Yeah, I think that's really important too. I know my button's not working. There we go. Hey, I'm gonna bring up Bacon, who's got a question for you. Our dear friend Bacon, do you have a question?
Oh, hello. I want
Hello.
to ask. I'm gonna introduce myself first. I'm 46. I voted for Kamala Harris from California, and I'm a disabled person, and I got three questions to ask you. Number one, what what will you do if you have a chance to be elected as a senator? What proposition would you enact to protect disabled community in workplace, equality on workplace, education, and our freedom of speech as a disabled person? Because for me, as a part of disabled community, we've been screaming, kicking, and almost the statistics alone say a lot of disabled community committed unaliving because of they cannot be heard because of this imaginary wall that they building upon me and the government. What are your plans for disabled community at the first one? You can answer that first.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I would have to be more familiar with what sort of discriminations are happening. To the extent that there's any discriminations that are happening that are not covered by law, then I would want to know about that so I could try to work on a platform to help people who are being discriminated against. I'm really shocked to hear that you suggested that your freedom of speech has been under attack as a disabled person. That seems like something that should never be taken away from anybody, regardless of whether you're disabled or a certain race or gender or sexuality. Like, freedom of speech is something that's supposed to be enshrined in our Constitution. And if for some reason you're not getting that, then I would think that there's already a legal case to be made on your behalf. Maybe reach out to the ACLU or any of these sorts of organizations. ACLU, if it's a freedom of speech issue, they normally love to take those up. So if that's happened to you, I would really encourage taking action now. I think the law is probably already on your side. To the extent that there is some sort of, I don't know any examples, you didn't really say an example, but to the extent that there's any sort of discrimination happening at you within the workplace, or other places, I think it'd be really important to learn what that is, because I'm not a disabled person, so I don't have that perspective. So I would have to work with advocates who would share those sorts of perspectives with me and see where there's holes in the current legal status or the current laws and regulations around the way we protect the rights of disabled people. If somebody's being fired because they're disabled, I would imagine that's already covered under law. But if it's not, then certainly it should be. So yeah, I would say I would have to be more informed on it, and this is not an issue I've focused a lot of time on. But I'm always against treating people as less than human, which is a huge problem in our society today, particularly in this moment right now. And to the extent that you're being treated less than everybody else, I would condemn that, and I would support any sort of reform that could try to improve your situation if there needs to be a change in regulations.
All right, thank you for that. And I'm gonna reach out to you, and I'm gonna DM you for disabled community, so you can have more perspective on this situation. And this is because I've been here, and I was a new immigrant. I came here to better my life. Like this, this country gave me opportunity to become a working class citizen. This is the only thing that I'm thankful for this country. That's one. And for my second question is, what else? What protection can you give to immigrants that wants to come here to better their lives? And how can you stop this rhetoric that is spreading on the other side? What can you promise for the new immigrants and the new citizenship that you can protect their rights as a human being, as a a visitor of this country?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really important question in this moment. So, excuse me. First of all, we need to stop dehumanizing language, full stop. Like, that is why we are seeing some of the political violence that we're happening. That's why we're seeing people going after immigrants as if they are less than us, because of the language and the rhetoric coming out of certain people who are very powerful, and largely starting with our president, but it filters on down, is disgusting. It needs to be condemned loudly and whenever possible. As I started off, my motivation for running this, my motivation for running was how we are treating immigrants in this country, deporting people without due process. Like, they are still humans, and the Constitution is very clear on how humans should be treated in this country, and due process is one of those constitutionally protected rights. So, anytime, I mean, I regularly condemn dehumanizing language, whether it's against, people of different race, genders, sexualities, or, national origins. Like, anytime it happens, it's wrong, and it makes it really easy when you start using dehumanizing language to discriminate and justify your discrimination. And at the end of the day, I was talking about this with a friend just yesterday, and I always think, if you were walking down the street and you saw somebody crying, right, you would stop and try to help them, or at least see if you could help them, right? Because you would look at them as a human, and we need to be able to keep that sort of internal compassion that I think most of us have when you interact with anybody, whether they look differently than you, speak a different language, whatever. So anytime you hear dehumanizing language, it is so atrocious. I hate it. It makes me really frustrated. Your second question about what would I do to try to help people who are trying to come to this country, I really do think we need to reform immigration, our immigration system. And they've been talking about it literally since before I even could vote. Like, they've been talking it since George Bush was elected. That was the first election. Bush v. Gore was the first election as an adult. And they've been talking about it since then, and there's been no progress. To me, it just seems like it doesn't have to be this complicated. And I think we need to acknowledge that there's this xenophobia that's running pretty strong in our country right now, and we need to try to push back on it. And I think if we get through this moment, we might have some opportunities for some real reform, because I think people are going to wake up to the mass immigration raids that are happening, all the people being deported right now, and food rotting on farms right now because there's nobody there to harvest this produce, and meat packing factories which are running at a fraction of what they should be running at capacity-wise because people are being deported, what just happened with that battery plant down in Georgia. Like, these things are going to start trickling through. It's going to cause shortages of food across our country, and it's going to hurt our economy, and it's going to be harder to find people to do the things that we take for granted. And I think that I don't know, maybe I'm looking at things a little optimistically, but I am optimistic that when people feel the pain associated with these terrible policies, there might be some appetite for actually doing positive reform to create a path to citizenship for people who want to come here. I'm not saying you should just open the door and just walk on, but we should have a quasi-open door policy where people can come in. Let's do some background checks on them. Let's try to learn who they are. Let's be able to take their fingerprints so that if somebody does come across the country, at least we know who they are. And if they do commit a crime, which most of them don't, but some may, then we have an easier chance of catching them if we had their fingerprints on file, for example. There has to be a better way to do this. And I just would love to see some movement on this issue, because it's been decades with literally nothing.
And thank you for taking my question. And I'm gonna tell you that the system right now is kind of messed up because there's literally thousands and thousands of applications that is rotting, rot, rotting on our embassies in worldwide. Because what you call this? For my case, if I came here as a permanent resident visa, those sponsorship, if your sponsor is unalive, that's that your paperwork is invalid because of your sponsor is unalive already. I would suggest more judges, more lawyers, and more staffing on our embassies. Because what that that right there, if we have that speedy movement on our immigration and paperwork, this will be this immigration problem will limit a little bit, not disappear constantly, but it will limit the wait time.
Right.
And I'm gonna say this. Thank you for your answer my question, and good luck on your race. Thank you,
Thank you.
Jess.
Thank you, Bacon. And I just want to add really quick to anybody who has any questions about this, just in case there's any question at all. Immigrants make America great. Full stop. So we're just going to leave that there.
Amen to
Um,
that.
we have so much work to do to make sure that that we can fix the system, but it's definitely something that I feel very strongly about. So, all right, next we're going to bring up Dexter, our bestie from Australia. I love it when you guys
Hi.
come up. Hello, because then I'm like, hey, I know that guy. I know that guy. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm normally not awake. So, just remind me, is there like a number of questions or
You
like
have
is
one
it we
question
feel
and
it
one
out?
follow up, and yeah,
Okay.
that's
I'll go with the simpler of the questions then. Um, so, one of the things that I do on here is ask the American people questions and we have a discussion. I've been given a question by one of my friends that I feel is good to ask you. What is your plan for dealing with misinformation in the future, like both on the government level and in the media?
Ooh, that's a
that's a
hard one.
heavy question.
It is a
Woof.
heavy
This is my simple question.
Dexter.
Well, Dexter, I'm afraid of your other question.
I know.
No, no. I mean, like at the end of the day, that's tough because at some level, you're asking somebody to be an arbiter of the truth, right? And so, I mean, my plan, my idea is to work on a way to get people to be better at critically thinking. I think we need like media literacy training in schools and maybe some civics engagement. I'm really appalled at some of the things that I see coming out of social media that people just believe because somebody said it. Like it's wild to me. So, I mean, it's I think there's two things. So the United States is more than pretty much any other country is really really protective of people being able to say whatever they want, so long as it's not libel or it's clearly leading to a risk. The classic example is always yelling fire in a crowded movie theater, right? Like you're clearly causing harm to people and somebody might die because of the panic that would ensue. That would be illegal. You don't have the right to do that. But you have every right, as evidenced by our president, to stand up and spew lies all day long. And so, as far as law goes, you're not going to be able to actually pass a law. I mean, I'm not a constitutional expert, but my understanding of our Constitution protects all speech outside of very limited circumstances. So misinformation would be protected under Constitution. So I think that really the best solution is to come up with a system where we can get better at people being a little bit more discerning. And I would like to think that that is possible. I haven't seen any really concerted effort. I think people who are malicious actors in this space with respect to misinformation, they try to undermine people who might actually try to do this. They try to undermine mainstream media as being corrupt or biased or whatever. And I think, but I think that there's a way to, get people to trust things again by maybe educating, like, hey, here's why this might be good, or hey, you read something in a place you think you trust. Well, see if you can fact check it somewhere else from a few other places that you trust. Like, it takes a little bit more work, and whether or not you can get people to do that work, that's a different question. But giving people the right tools, which maybe they don't have right now, particularly since we've kind of this era that we're in now is a different system than what we dealt with even a decade ago. And so getting all this new information, which is oftentimes false, blasted at you every day, I think it's still like we're learning how to process it and deal with that misinformation. I mean, I remember just a quick example. Maybe it was about maybe a little more than 5 years ago. On Facebook, there was a picture of a young man. He looked like he was maybe early 20s, floating around Facebook, and a woman I went to high school with, she posted it, and it said, if you see this man coming into your shelter looking for a dog, don't give it to him because he's using shelter dogs as bait to train like fighting dogs or whatever. And I was like, something about it didn't seem right to me. And it's like, this isn't that big of a deal, right? But except for there's a real person. This is before AI generated images, right? There's a real person's face and picture on that. I did a quick Google of this, and I was able to find that this was all like fake or whatever. And I let her know. And I think it's like hard for people to not trust things when we used to be able to trust things. And so we need to kind of develop a new skill set. And I think part of that might be using an educational system to teach people to be like, don't just trust something, don't just repost something because it's scary or it's shocking or it's something you think people should know, because like reposting bad information is bad. Like, it's just bad. And so we need to be a bit more discerning before we repost things, before we believe things. And I think we're starting to get there, because I think everybody's been burned by, like, that woman. I reached out to her who posted it on Facebook, and she said, I had no idea. I am so sorry. I'll have to take this down. It's like, you don't have to apologize to me, but there is some boy's face who's being blasted around the internet right now saying that he's, basically going to get these dogs to send them to their death in some sort of baiting scheme to train fighting dogs. Like, this poor guy, probably some ex girlfriend who's after him or something. Like, who knows? So, we need to be more discerning, and I think educating people on how to do that would be really key. And maybe that's something that the government can help with respect to developing programs or funding programs in schools.
Yeah, and that actually speaks quite well to things that I've heard from Americans over the past few weeks, is that they want better education, they want education reform, they want to learn about voting and I was surprised that you guys don't learn that in school, because here in Australia we have like an entire class dedicated to learning about politics in our voting system, which it's different to you guys. Whenever I get asked, oh, who did you vote for, and that question when I go on Other Lives, I end up giving a civics lesson.
Yeah, I mean, we used to have
But yeah,
civics, but I
people
think
want that.
it got pushed out as maybe less important as various reforms. Like, I was talking to somebody about this recently, and I guess civics used to be pretty regular, and then during No Child Left Behind, which was a George Bush innovation, and I don't think it was a malicious attempt to take out this. I think it was just deemed as, oh, everybody kind of understands our Constitution, everybody understands our voting process, and what they aren't doing well at is basic reading or understanding math, because everybody always hears that American schools are failing on national levels. And so I think that they've kind of like de-emphasized those things, and maybe we need to get back to it. I know that there's been some efforts in my state to do that, but the United States education system is very fragmented. Every state's is in charge. There's very little federal regulation over our education system. It's almost entirely dictated by the states, with the exception of a few things. The federal Department of Education really only deals with like certain things, like like the previous gentleman speaking before, like making sure that disabled people get the care that they need, and aren't being discriminated against because it's oftentimes more expensive to educate a disabled child. So those sorts of things fall into the federal preview, but most of the curriculums are decided at the state level. And so it is actually kind of a hard place to reach, but it doesn't mean we can't try to get a civics reboot nationwide. And I think it would probably go a long way to help at least some people who are clueless right now.
Yeah, it's part of a holistic educational experience. Do both. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I think Susu's the next one up.
Yep. Thank you so much, Dexter, for
So,
coming up. We appreciate you.
yeah. Thank you, and good luck with your race. I'll
Thank
drop
you.
myself down.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Susu is going to come up and ask you a question next. Thank you for joining us, Susu.
Here we go. Hello.
Hello.
All right, so I'm a former Massachusetts person who moved to New Hampshire about almost be 5 years ago now. I've since, in this past year, retired as a teacher. So a lot of my concern is seeing what's happening with education right now, dismantling of our education system. And I think one of my biggest concerns as a teacher of special education has been the school systems and what they are doing with the funding is often taking away from the kids who need it the most. What are your thoughts about IDEA and the 504 programs and getting our schools more?
Yeah, I think well, if you're in New Hampshire, then you know how bad it is. Like we're under full.
Yeah.
They're doing a full-throated assault. For those of you who aren't from New Hampshire, the short version is they're basically defunding our schools in New Hampshire at the state level. We have been unconstitutionally funding our schools for decades, and our legislature just doesn't care, and they ignore the New Hampshire Supreme Court's ruling, which says we're unconstitutionally funding our school system or underfunding it, and they just ignore it, and it's like kind of shocking, and it kind of shows that when you have bad faith politicians who don't respect the institutions, including the court system, which is I think where we're at with Trump, you can just ignore it and get away with it because they don't have any mechanism by which to enforce things. You're supposed to have faith in our system, and you're supposed to have faith in respecting the institutions that hold us all together. And in New Hampshire, they don't. They just regularly ignore these court rulings. So, and then in New Hampshire, we also have these voucher systems, which are starting to. I think they're starting to show up in other states too, but they're pretty far along right now. And basically, it's taking the little bit of money the state does pay on education funding and giving it to the richest people among us who want to send their kids to private schools. Were already doing it, and now they're taking the money out of the local school system and sending it to the person sending their child to the private school instead, which of course is a real problem because you can't fund the school if you're taking money out of it and sending it to private schools, and the school cost doesn't drop, but there's one less child. I mean, it's still the same salary for the teachers who are there, the heating, the electricity, all that sort of maintenance of the building. So it is a real problem. I think so. At the federal level doesn't give much money to schools nationwide, right? Like, I think in New Hampshire we spend around $20,000 a year on schools, and probably less than around 3,000 of that comes from the federal government. The rest of it comes from the state, which is about 5,000, and then the remainder of that 20,000 is all in the property tax owners. New Hampshire has the second highest property taxes in the country, I believe. And so we really, don't have a lot of leverage to pull with respect to funding schools from the federal level. And I think I'm not an expert in education, and there are areas where I have my expertise on, and I could talk about that all day. So I would just, I'm not an expert, what I do is I just kind of lay out what I think things should be and how to get there. Let me work with some experts to figure it out. But what I think we need to do is acknowledge that schools need to educate everybody. Everybody deserves the same opportunities in their educational system. And if there's somebody who's disabled, then we need to make sure that the resources necessary are there to afford that disabled child who is more expensive to educate, still is able to get educated. And that's one of the things that I think is being currently attacked in New Hampshire, perhaps in other parts of the country. And so I think that's one of the, I think that's, it's still early on, but the dismantling of the Department of Education and then Trump as our president more broadly, who just kind of ignores, congressional mandates, that's one of the things that the federal government does, was to ensure that disabled people are getting the services they need. And if you don't have a strong federal government ensuring that, then it's going to be really easy to, and there's going to be an incentive for states, particularly when money is getting short like it is in New Hampshire right now, there's going to be a strong incentive to defund special education, because it is the most expensive part of the budget in many school districts. And so you need to be able to fund the federal education program and then have strong enforcement that the people who need those special resources, extra resources, are getting them. And it's somehow, there's consequences to the state when they don't do it, or the district if they don't do it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Another area, just another quickie, is
Of course.
what do you think about our voting system as it is now across the country in terms of the Electoral College? And is there any other system that you think might be something to advocate for?
Oh boy, I mean, I could talk about this for a while. Let me give you the quick. Yeah, this goes back to my whole reforming thing. I honestly talk about gerrymandering, I talk about money in politics. There's a lot of reforms that need to be done. So I'm actually a proponent of ranked choice voting. I ran for the New Hampshire Democratic Party Rules Committee, and we just passed implementation of Rules Committee. The Rules Committee just passed a amendment that I put in to elect our internal officers by ranked choice voting, and I'm hoping that Democratic Party nationwide starts to just incorporate ranked choice voting into our entire system. Open primaries is another one. Open primaries is a great idea. The current systems are, remember, if you don't like the results that we're getting, it's because the current systems are protecting those in power. And those in power are the ones who are fighting for these current systems to stay status quo. And that includes the Electoral College. I would do disband. I know that's constitutional amendment or whatever in order to do that. But yes, I would disband the Electoral College in a heartbeat if it was up to me, if I could wave my magic wand, because I do think it's a real problem. I respect the idea that every state gets a say, an equal say in the Senate, and then there's a proportional representation of every state in the House. And I think that the popular vote is the appropriate way to select our presidents. And I think one of the big injustices and sort of an unintentional consequence, or an unintentional attack on our democracy and the faith in our democracy, is when the person who gets the most number of votes doesn't win. And people say, this last time, as much as I was disappointed that Trump won, I'm glad that he won with a popular vote, because I think it would have led to a lot more unrest had he won the same way he did last time, where he lost by, he lost by like 1 million votes or something, right? When he lost to Hillary Clinton. Mm-hmm. And so I think, to me, the Electoral College is a good example of something that should be reformed, because it undermines our system right now when somebody like Trump or somebody like George Bush wins without winning the popular vote. And so I would love to see that reformed.
Thank you. I agree 100%. I will step down, Jess.
Thank you, Susu. I appreciate you. So let's talk a little bit about the things that you see needing reform in our country. One of those things being term limits. Can you talk to us about how you feel about term limits and give us some insight on how you would approach that, especially when it comes to members of our highly inadequate formerly Supreme Court?
Yeah, so I mean, if I could, I like to answer these sorts of questions with, if I could wave my magic wand. So if I could wave my magic wand, I would have the Supreme Court be every 2 years, a new one expires. And so if you got appointed to the Supreme Court this year by, I guess it would be Trump as our current president, you would have a 18-year term, and then you don't get reappointed again no matter what. Your term is limited. And if the only exception to that would be if somebody died or for some reason stepped down, and so they got that extra appointment, they would still fill the remainder of that term. So if you were 10 years into that 18-year term, you would get 8 years, and then maybe they would be open for another appointment when that term ended. I think that makes like the most sense for the Supreme Court. I think this lifetime appointment thing is dangerous, and I would love to see reform in that. Again, that's a constitutional amendment. Seems like a heavy lift, but it's something that we should probably start talking about, because even things that make a lot of sense to those people who are thinking about reforms, again, the people in power don't want these changes, and so you have to really start convincing people and doing that work and having these conversations. When it comes to term limits of people elected, I think I can see that both ways. I love that there's only 2 terms for a president, although Trump seems to think that he deserves more. Let's hope that doesn't happen. But I would say this might disappoint people, disappoint some listeners. I would say that I don't have a firm view one way or the other about term limits on Congress or senators. I'm open to the idea, but I can see both sides, and I haven't settled on one, so I need to kind of think more about it. But you got one side that says, listen, you got these people who are corrupt and incompetent, and they're in there, right? And if there was a term limit, at least they wouldn't be there forever. And the way the system, particularly in the Democratic Party, rewards longevity, you might have somebody who comes in who's great, but they don't get put onto committees right away, or powerful committees, or chairs of committees, because of how good they are, because they don't have the seniority. So maybe there needs to be some internal reforms of how they select those sorts of things. But when you look at the other side of it, is there are people like on my committee, I have a Republican who chairs my committee, and I have a lot of respect for him. He's sort of an old school Republican, not one of these terrible, divisive, he loves to tell me, he loves to tell me stories about how like Republicans and Democrats used to actually work together on things, and now there's like no incentive in New Hampshire. And our committee still operates that way, and I think he does a good job. And he also, because he's been on this committee since 1984, and New Hampshire would be tough. We don't get paid as state reps, and so you just kind of take who you can get to run for these races. But he is a wealth of knowledge, and when we're talking about bills and fixing bills or reforming a bill, he remembers why the original bill happened 20 years ago or whatever. And so there is a certain benefit to understanding how systems work and understanding the history of something in a way that you just wouldn't get if you constantly had cycling over people. And so there's sort of 2 sides to think about on this. And, from a president, it makes sense that you don't want a king, so I'm glad it's term limited. I don't know if that concern isn't as much of a concern when you're talking about one of 100 or one of 435 in the respective congressional, Congress seats. So yeah, that's maybe not the answer people want to hear. I kind of see both sides to it, and I just need to kind of think more about it.
That's fair. That's fair. Can you elaborate on what it means to you to be a public servant?
Yeah, to be a public servant means that you are there working to solve problems as you see them and as you get informed by them. So, I have my favorite constituent service win, if you will, happened in my town. So I live in a small town. We have the famous ice cream shop I was telling you about. We also have this pretty famous, popular brewery in my town, and they partnered on a beer. So they made this waffle cone beer using the waffle cones that they make at the ice cream shop in the beer. And it's a pretty good beer. It has like an aftertaste of waffle cone at the end of it. And so they had a local artist draw the artwork can of beer, and the Liquor Commission in New Hampshire rejected it, but they don't say why they rejected it. So this brewery had like huge tanks of beer in their brewery just sitting there, unable to be canned because they couldn't actually sell the beer with that label. And so they reached out to me, and I was able to reach out to the Liquor Commission, and I was able to be like, listen, And the other wild thing about this story is that there's this appeals process that you can do is like 2 times a month you can do it. They were going to have to wait like 2 to 4 weeks to be able to get approval, or it still might get rejected if you go through this appeals process. So I call up and I'm like, listen, this is insane. This is like the 2 most prominent businesses in my town. They're the number one, the number 2 employers in my town. And I was just like, they're trying to work on a collaboration to create economic development in my town, to create a product that will bring people and popularity to both of these businesses in my town. And you guys are rejecting their artist drawing of a local artist, so that person got hired locally to create a cool artwork. It looked like an ice cream cone with like it was a beer tap filling up the ice cream cone, and and they can't tell you why it's rejected. They just say it's rejected. I was like, this seems like a freedom of speech thing. If somebody does challenge you, they're going to sue the state of New Hampshire. But second, like, this is also just wrong. Like, you need to give guidance of what it is so that they can not waste money hiring an artist, not print up thousands of labels only to have them potentially be thrown away, and then occupy tanks so they can't even brew any more beer right now while these other tanks are being full of this beer. And so I was able to get on the phone, put some pressure on them, and work with them directly, and got it approved within a day. And that's the sort of work that you got to do now. Like, is that super high profile? Is that going to get a bunch of it was high profile in my town, I suppose, but nobody in the state knows about that. I think it's also like, a public servant is you're standing up for those who can't stand up for themselves. So the gentleman earlier who was an immigrant and disabled, like, people like him are probably targets to be ignored or discriminated against. Like, the public servant, you don't just serve the mainstream. You also got to look out for the people who aren't always plugged in the way, whether it's the homeless person on the street or the person who has a drug addiction problem, a substance abuse problem, whether it's the child who is bouncing around from one foster care to the next. Like, those people need to be taken care of. Like, it's a society, and so a public servant needs to take care of everybody and not just the masses. And yes, the masses are the ones who are going to get you elected. The ones who are frustrated about their stagnant wages and all that stuff, they're the ones who are going to get you, elected, because they're the ones who are going to show up because of their frustration. The people who don't vote still need to be heard, though. That homeless person who maybe they just need a helping hand, or that person who has a substance abuse problem. Maybe we need to figure out a way to get them into programs. Like, those people, and they're harder to reach, and sometimes that's why we have that is why we have advocacy groups that reach out to these people to try to speak for them. But, public servant means you help everybody, not just the ones who you think might vote for you. And I think the clearest example of what a public servant is not is our president. He literally only wants to help his people. How often he said that? His people. And he give a crap less about, a Democrat's wish on anything, because he knows if that person didn't vote for him, he'll never care about you. And I reach out. I'll let anybody reach out to me. I'll respond to anybody. I have a woman who I'm sure has never voted for me, never will vote for me, but has talked to me numerous times about bills to do with trans rights and stuff like that. And she's tried really hard to lobby me to vote against them. And I won't do that because it goes against my core values. But I give her the time so she can at least feel as though she did what she thinks is important. And that person deserves access to me no less than the trans person that I'm really going to go to bat for, And
Right.
so public servant is for everybody. And I really do try to practice that, even when it's people I know didn't vote for me.
Can you very quickly just sort of comment about how you feel about the healthcare system in this country and where you feel like, as a senator, you would want to take that?
Yeah, so I think healthcare needs to be something that we need a system in this country where we have so much wealth that anybody who needs to get care can go get care without worrying about becoming bankrupt. And that's sort of like, I don't know the best way to get there, whether it's Medicare for all, or healthcare for all, or we want to just put a bunch of subsidies into these insurance programs that through the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare. I'm not an expert on that, like I said, But my goal is to get to a system where people who want to get care, or need to get care, can get care, and they don't have to make the choice of whether or not to go to the hospital because it might lead to a 5-figure bill or 6-figure bill that might bankrupt them.
Yeah.
And follow them around for the rest of our lives. That's the end game that we need to be striving for. And how we get there is less important to me than the actual destination.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Hey, Oslo.
Hey there, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good.
Good. Jared for New Hampshire is here on our panel. Oslo is our favorite curious red monster who joins us from time to time to talk about activism. So let's switch gears for a little bit. Oslo, if you wouldn't mind, I would love to invite you up to give us a little pep talk about activism, my friend. Do you mind?
No, not at all. But first I wanted to ask, Jared, have you ever considered growing like a Tom Selleck mustache? I think it would look really good.
No, but I now have.
Oh, now you have. All right, okay.
Now I'm thinking about it, and maybe that will be my next appearance, and I'll have a mustache.
Oh,
I have
all
seen
right.
the beard, like the beard pictures that you have, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What? There's beard pictures?
There's
I'm
beard
gonna have to
pictures,
go check
Oslo.
this out.
There is. My LinkedIn profile is still like an old Photoshop, or not Photoshop, old photo from when I worked as an economist, and I'm fully bearded. My beard's much more white now, and my vanity, I guess, keeps me coming out the beard now.
Yeah, I mean, I dye mine red, so you know.
Oh,
It looks
okay.
good, though. You pull it off. You
Oh,
pull it off.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. I love it. All right, awesome. Well, let me make you bigger so you can have the floor. Hello, Oslo.
Hey there, everyone. I just kind of wanted a little bit today to talk about the importance of getting involved because it seems more important now than ever that we show the American people what the left is all about, whether that's, peacefully going into the streets or organizing, behind the scenes in a political way for the things that we advocate for. I've seen this week a lot of people, the president included, saying they want to go after the left's funding. So we really need to mobilize and show the people who will doubt us where we are on the left and what we actually stand for, because there's a lot of misinformation about the left that's going to be swirling around. And we need to show through our actions who we really are. And so that's kind of just my general idea for today is I've been thinking about it a lot, ways that we can show how we're getting involved that are peaceful and productive and, to show our values. Because that's the best way we're going to counteract this narrative coming from the right, is just by showing people.
Definitely. I feel like a lot of people they have tunnel vision right now, like they only can see what's being put in front of them, and there's so much being put in front of them. So I think it's really important to remember that, Oslo, to remember who we are.
Yeah. I mean, the middle class is being squeezed in this country right now. So we can come from this horrible week that we've all experienced and we've all been through, and we can say, this is our plan for America. And this is where we want it to go. And it should be, it mostly is all positive things that the left is advocating for. So let's lean into that.
Definitely.
I agree. I like that.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you, Oslo. Thank you very much. Is there anything else that you wanted to
You're welcome
add?
very much.
Like the biggest.
One more
fan.
thing to add, Jared.
Yeah.
I'm running a series called Rock the House, but I'm going to do a spin-off series for Senate candidates in primaries. If you're interested, send me a message. It's just kind of like introduce yourself to the 30,000 people that follow me if you wish to. And if not, that's okay too.
No, it sounds like a great opportunity. Thank you for the invite.
Yeah, definitely do that, because Oslo is like, when I grow up, I want to be like Oslo. I'm just saying.
Oh wow.
I
Well, I'm
have
very small, so
I have a
you
lot
have to
of
grow
work
down
to
a
do.
little bit, I think.
I know, right? Yep, awesome. Okay, cool. Thank you so much, Mr. Oslo, our friend Oslo. We love you. You're
Love you
fantastic.
too. You want me to stick around to the end?
Sure, you can if you want to.
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna make Regil bigger though. Ready?
Yep.
Bam! Regil's bigger. Hey, Regil.
Oslo brings in the people.
Oslo
So
brings in the people.
I kind of dropped the ball a little bit on Activist Alley, but I wanted to step up because I think one of the big things we can do right now to make some meaningful change is, and excuse the bluntness, the American populace is extremely stupid. We can definitely take some time. And if you have knowledge, spreading knowledge is probably one of the best things you can do right now, whether it be basic history knowledge, basic understanding of civics, all that can make a big difference right now in what we're seeing in politics. Because we see that the average American is struggling to read, let alone understand complex subjects. So for those of us who actually understand just a simple subject, spreading your knowledge can be a big change that we're seeing right now. And I think that a lot of people are doing that.
I think that's great advice.
Yeah, that's good advice.
I do. I think that a lot of people are.
People who aren't there. Like that's sorry, I just totally cut you off, Jess. But one of the things I always say to people is, you are wherever you are. If you're an expert on a topic, or if you're well read on a specific topic, be patient with the person who doesn't understand something that seems so simple and seems so obvious to you. I think it's really important. And I think this is one thing that the left is really bad at sometimes. It's not being forgiving for some people's ignorance. And, we need to give them some grace and some space to get to where we want them to be in a reasonable way without shaming them in the process. And there's a lot of people who do a lot of shaming and think that you should know something that you don't know. And I think that's unfair, and I think it's unproductive, because what it does is it makes us seem elitist, and it makes us seem snobbish, and it makes us seem unwelcoming. And I don't think that should be the way we behave.
Yep, I think.
For example, everyone should know that the uvula is in the throat.
It's very important information.
Really important.
So some people get confused and they're like,
I'll be sure to
"No, it's
post
in
it
here,
on
guys."
my socials tonight.
But just spreading knowledge, I think, is a great way that we can reach other people now.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are not looking at that fact.
No, I agree.
I need that on a sticker, Oslo.
Hey, the uvula's up here.
I like it. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. We are getting close to time, but before we go, Jared, if you would not mind telling the good folks how they can get involved in helping your campaign. I want to know how they can get involved. I want to know all of the nitty-gritty. Can you give us the download?
Definitely. So obviously, like all politicians, it costs a lot of money to run for a race, and I'm not taking any money from any political action committees or from any corporation. So even if you're a billionaire, the most amount of money you can give me is the federal legal max, which I believe is $3,500. So that's not life-changing or campaign-changing amount of money. But in a perfect world, I'd have 100,000 people give me, $50, and then I got $5 million to run a race. I never have to worry about being beholden to anybody. And so ideally, spread the message of who I am. If you're able to contribute to me, that would be super grateful, because I'm running up against the main competitor is our current Congressman, Chris Pappas. He's already raised around $3 million. He's well connected. He's taken a lot of money from PACs and corporations, and I'm intentionally not doing that, which puts me at a disadvantage, but I'm doing it because if we don't have more people elected in the path that I'm trying to get elected on, then we're never going to change the system. And so if you could help me with that, with donations, even if it's a small amount of money, if you could donate something to me, my website is www.jared4for, spelled out, .com. It's the same as my screen name, just .com. And another thing is too is if you are somebody who's interested in maybe volunteering, even if you live on the other side of the country, one of the ways, no matter how much money I raise, I'm going to most likely be at a disadvantage to my primary opponent. And so what I would like to do is to get people who are willing to volunteer to like write hand address envelopes, and then I'm going to have, I've already got a lot of people who've already volunteered to do this, but I still need more, because ultimately I would love to mail out 100,000 plus hand addressed envelopes with a letter inside from me, so that people will actually open it up and read it and hopefully learn about me. And I think that's going to be one of our strategies, to be real grassroots, to reach out to people directly versus those stupid postcard mailers that we all got 1,000 of every election cycle. I was thinking, what if I send out 2 of these mailers of hand-addressed envelopes? People are more likely to read it, hopefully open it, read it, and maybe actually take the time to learn about me, because it was like a thoughtful envelope that showed up with a good letter inside versus just like sort of a tacked postcard. And so if anybody wants to sign up for something like that, then you could, in your own time, hand address some envelopes, and then I'd have them mailed to me. And then when it came time, I'd mail them out to people, as I got close to the actual election. So that's going to be another way people can volunteer their time, even if you live in another part of the country. But yeah,
That's
money,
a great idea.
spreading my message, and then volunteering some time is the best way to reach out to me.
I think that is
Someone
such
had
a great
question
idea.
in the comments, and I feel like Dexter is maybe out of the country. You can't. Can someone donate from another country like that? That gets complicated, doesn't it?
They can if they're an American citizen, yeah. So I've already had. I have a really close friend who lives in Germany. He's an American citizen. He just lives in Germany now, and he made a donation to my campaign. But you cannot do it if you're not an American citizen.
Right.
Fair. Okay. I guess
Which
that's
is how it should
fair. Yeah, I suppose. All right. Cool beans. Well, thank you for that. And just a reminder, folks, big money in politics has absolutely ruined our country. We are no longer interested in politics that is only serving the corporations. We don't want candidates who are funded by AIPAC and other special interests. We want candidates just like Jared who are going to serve the people, but that money has to come from somewhere. So whether it's your wallet or your time, please make sure that you're doing everything in your power to help these grassroots candidates. Even following and sharing their content gets more eyes on them and pushes their message across the interwebs, and you can do that for free. The time for change is now, and we all have to work together. So wouldn't you agree with that, Jared?
I do. I agree. I always say, I do get frustrated sometimes with these people who complain a lot and then they don't actually follow through. It's like, if you're somebody who's frustrated in this moment, you do have some power to make a change. And you can donate as little as $5 to my campaign. It would make a difference. You could follow me and actually retweet anything you think or repost anything you think is good, and like and share it. All of those things, like you said, to help get the algorithm to notice me, and hopefully more people will eventually see who I am. And you never know, that's how people go viral, right?
Definitely. All it takes is one. So
Right.
This has been so wonderful. And I would be absolutely remiss if I did not send a special thank you to the mods, my amazing mods that are in here, our incredible content creators that are here supporting us, Oslo, and other amazing content creators that are here as well. Thank you guys so much. And our incredible design genie, K-Law. Please send them all some well-deserved love in the chat. They definitely deserve it. And also make sure you're still registered to vote, because they're doing some hanky stuff with the election cycles and things like that so make sure, just check them out in your area. You can go to vote.gov to make sure you are still on the voter rolls, and just make sure that everything is wrapped up all nicely for you. Don't just show up on election day and hope that everything's going to go well. So you got to participate. So this was so inspiring, and I know that we have a lot of people who are very scared right now. But I want to remind everyone that the fear is the point. Fear leads to panic. Panic leads to inaction. But hope and community are the antidote for all of it. So tune in on Friday when we sit down with an amazing woman that most of us know and love. Tanya Cook for Assembly will sit down and talk with us about what an Assembly member does and how one runs for that position and how we can help her make real change in her neighborhood. So I hope you guys will follow us on Substack, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, The Tube of You, and follow thepeoplesickday.com if you want to throw a wrench in this bish. I said bish. We love the TikTok shop. It is just about time for TBH. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with us, Jared, before we let you go today?
No, that's it. Yeah, just check out my website and reach out if you want to help in some way. I appreciate it.
I have absolutely loved sitting down and talking with you, sir. You are going to make such an amazing senator, and we are all behind you. So thank you so much for joining us today.
All right. Thanks so much.
Of course. Thank you, everybody, for stopping by, and join us on Friday. We'll have another fun one. Thank you so much. TBH with Tab and Missy is coming up real soon, so tune in for that, and take care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Bye, Oslo.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.